Now to Mike Buchanan. Thank you so much for joining us.
This is a pleasure, Julia.
Well, what's the name of your political party first of all?
It's Justice for Men and Boys, and the subtitle is "And the Women Who Love Them."
It's quite a long party title, isn't it?
It is indeed.
But I suppose
I wouldn't call it snappy.
Yes, it does what it says on the tin. Why do you think that we need a party to represent justice for men and boys?
Right. Even with so many women working today, men collectively pay about 72% of the income tax in the country, and women just 28%. In cash terms, men pay about £64 billion more income tax than women every year. Yet for well over 30 years, men have been ever more assaulted by the actions and inactions of successive governments. Whenever legislation or official guidance favours one gender over the other, it always favours women over men. And in fact, I'm not aware of a single piece of legislation passed in the last 30 years which favours men over women. And the Conservative-led coalition is just as bad as the preceding Labour administration in this regard.
Well, you could argue that a lot of reasons why there's been this sort of move to have legislation favouring women over men, if such does exist, is that because women were not favoured for so many years. I mean, my mother, I can remember, even as a teenager, my mother telling me how outrageous she thought it was that her tax form, her tax return had to be signed by her husband. She didn't even have the right to send her own tax form in without his permission. Women have had so few rights for so many centuries. Isn't it about time we had a bit of the government on our side?
But it sounds. I mean, that's almost like you're talking about retributive justice. I mean, for a start, I'd say that that a lot of what's presented as women being oppressed in the past was just separation of roles. But quite apart from that, do you really sort out, even if it was an injustice, do you replace one injustice with another? It's a bit like saying that to compensate for black people having been slaves, that every black person in America today should be given a white slave.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. But it's interesting. You make the point that the men pay the vast majority of the income tax. Surely that's because they're more likely to be in high-paid jobs, and therefore that's why there are far more billionaires and millionaires, and those who pay a large chunk of our tax take are men. You could argue, could you not, that women are lower paid than men, and that's of course why they pay a lower amount of tax.
Well, no. I mean, there's rather more than that. I mean, right from the moment that they leave education to when they get to retirement age, women are far more likely than men to not work or to work part time.
Well, you say not work. Most of them. I mean, look, they're at home looking after young children a lot of the time. The women who aren't working, and I don't know about you, Mike. I find going to work in an office a darn sight easier than looking after young children all day.
No, indeed. But I mean, women today have a potential working life of 45 years. You can hardly say that looking after young children takes up a huge proportion of that 45 years today.
Yeah, but the argument has been for many years, has it not, that women leave work to look after their children for a few years, and then it's very difficult to get back on the ladder. And the reason why the men are able to earn good salaries, do full-time jobs, work the extra hours, get the overtime, pay all that extra tax, and get richer, is because the women are at home or doing the part-time work and doing the school pick-up and picking up the slack at home.
Well, that's part of it, but there is another side to this, which is that men are far more likely to be work-centred than women, and I'd refer you here to some research published in the year 2000 by Catherine Hackim, a renowned sociologist. It's called preference theory, and her research basically found that that 4 out of every 7 British men of working age were work-centred, but only one in 7 British women.
Oh, I'd certainly agree with that. Listen, if you ever listen to this show, I've had many arguments with the likes of Harriet Harman over the fact that a lot of the issues that she says are holding women back, I think, don't exist. They are women making choices themselves. Now, listen, some of the things in your manifesto, effectively, from what I've looked at from your website, you talk about a feminised education system. That I looked. You know what? I'm finding myself agreeing with you on that. That taking out the competition in schools and the sort of almost the male way of learning has had an effect, no question. You talk about how men die from prostate cancer, as prostate cancer as women die from breast cancer, yet far more money goes on looking at breast cancer rather than issues for men. Higher unemployment for men. issues in terms of pro-women employment policies, about how unfair divorce settlements, female on male domestic violence, fathers' rights, the suicide rate 3 times higher for men. I'm very surprised. I'm very surprised to say this, Mike. I have an awful feeling you may have a point.
Thank you,
as
Julia.
Scary as it is. No, but it is interesting, as you say, when you actually go through those issues, throughout that, it is a question that the tide has turned massively in women's favour on a lot of issues, and perhaps to the detriment of men.
Yes, I sometimes ask militant feminists to give an example of where the state favours women over men, and their faces generally go a very interesting colour, because they can't think of one. They claim to be oppressed, but they can't think of a single area.
Well, you mean where the state favours men over... Yeah.
Yes.
So your argument is that all the work that's been done to through feminism to help women it was good up to the point of equality, but it's now gone past that, and it's now to the point where it's actually hurting men. And you want to act on part of men and boys.
Yes, I think it's the great distinction between equality of opportunity and equality of outcome.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, equality of opportunity, I mean, I think that's what, if you like, old school feminists would believe in. Mm-hmm. But then we all believe that now. I mean, by that standard, I'm a feminist. But it's when you want to have equality of outcomes, regardless of the effort that women are prepared to put in and the hours and everything else. So we have militant feminists bleating on about how few female MPs there are, and yet the male MPs are passing all this pro-female legislation. I mean, goodness grief! I mean, what on earth would the situation be if all MPs were Harriet Harman clones?
Now there's a thought. One of
the
issues you've also written about is the issue of gender quotas in the boardroom. You're not in favour of that either.
No, but simply because the evidence is absolutely black and white from a number of studies in a number of countries that when the proportion of women on major corporate boards is increased, corporate performance declines, and it is just black and white. The evidence is overwhelming.
Oh, I'd heard actually opposite evidence, but I have to say again, on this, I find myself agreeing with the issue in terms of I don't think that women are this pathetic little class of people who need to have that sort of extra help and quotas. Mike, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. He's the leader of the Justice for Men and Boys Party. I want to know, do you think we need a party to represent men's rights? Has it been a long time coming? Is this a case of feminism going too far, the feminisation of schools, of jobs, the unfair divorce settlements, fathers' rights, retirement age, healthcare, gender quotas? Is life pretty unfair for men these days? Fascinated to hear your thoughts on this.